Good morning. I think we're going to go ahead and get started. My name's Krishna Thavaraja. I'm a pulmonologist at Henry Ford Hospital in Detroit, and I'm very pleased to be part of the session and this program altogether. But today we're going to be discussing planning for the future. And so our first speaker will be Dr. Kathleen Lindell. She is an associate professor of medicine and nursing at the University of Pittsburgh, long name here, Dorothy P. and Richard Simmons Center for Interstitial Lung Disease at University of Pittsburgh Medical College, where she's the executive director of the support program and leads the PF support group. Her primary area of research is in improving quality of life of patients with PF and the quality of life of their caregivers. Our other speaker who will be joining us remotely is Lori Chandler. Lori is a partner at Vigilant Capital, a private wealth management firm. Prior to joining Vigilant, Lori was a senior vice president in the private clients group of Fleet Boston Financial for 18 years. So Lori's earned her MBA from Southern New Hampshire University. She's a certified financial planner and a graduate of the Cannon Financial Institute for Trust, Estate, and Financial Planning. She currently serves as a trustee and treasurer on the board of the PFF, and she also serves as a trustee on the Brigham and Women Lung Advisory Board and is chair of the Patient Family Advisory Council of Portsmouth Regional Hospital. And lives currently in New Hampshire. Few bookkeeping items before I hand this over to Kathy. So we will have time for questions, but at the end of both speakers' talks to you. And so we just encourage people, if you can come to the microphone, but we'll also have someone coming around with the microphone, so you can also raise your hand. If you have multiple questions, we're going to ask that you ask one question and wait for others to ask their question, and then ask your next question, just so that everyone gets a chance to participate. And so with that, I think I'll give this over to Kathy, and I thank everyone for coming.
Thank you for the kind introduction. So thank you for coming today. I know that in working with patients who have pulmonary fibrosis, it isn't always easy to get up and moving in the morning and getting your oxygen and your lungs and your muscles and everything else going. So I applaud your efforts, so thank you. So today I'd like to talk about palliative care, hospice, and advanced directives, and what you can do to better prepare for your future. So by way of disclosure, I currently have a grant from the National Institute of Nursing Research where I'm studying an intervention called a program of support, and it's to introduce early palliative care for patients with IPF and their caregivers. And the target audience is 80 patients with IPF and their caregivers, and we're at 73, and we hope to finish, we will finish recruiting in December. I also have a small grant from Three Lakes Partners, and then I'm on the Genentech ILD Nursing Advisory Board. So these are our patients in Pittsburgh. Every year we do a support or a golf outing associated with our support group, and our mantra is that when patients are diagnosed with IPF or PF, that they continue to live with their disease. And so this golf outing occurred as a result of a generous donation from a patient. He attended support group. I wasn't ever quite sure, was he getting anything out of support group, because he always sat in the back of the room and he didn't really participate. But one day at support group, he came up to me at the end and he said, I own a golf course. If you ever have a need for a fundraiser, you can host at my golf course, and all the proceeds are yours. So this past year, this is the picture from the 15th annual golf outing at the Simmons Center. And all of these patients, and these are patients, they're caregivers, they're people from our center, our friends. Oxygen is provided by our Medcare, which is our hospital DME. And in the very center of the picture, the tall woman is his daughter. He succumbed to the disease probably 8 or 9 years ago, and these daughters of these patients really kind of step up, and she's been very influential in making this a success. So that's how I like to start. This is living with pulmonary fibrosis. Now this is my absolute favorite. So this is one of our patients. Her name is Joan. Joan is here seen dancing with a native in Australia. And she tells the story that when she received the diagnosis of pulmonary fibrosis, that she realized this is serious. There are a lot of things left on my plate that I want to do. And so she luckily had the resources and was able to travel to Australia. But the key is, here she is dancing with her portable oxygen. So it's living with IPF. So we hope that sets the stage for sometimes what individuals don't want to talk about, palliative care and hospice. So we're about how do we help you achieve your best quality of life. So our objectives today is, why is this discussion important? We're going to define palliative care and hospice, planning for the future, decision makers and legacy, important papers, and resources. We'll provide resources at the end that will help you. So why is this important? So sorry, there's a ton of words, but I'm going to read this to you. So the disease course for pulmonary fibrosis is unpredictable. Patients report progressive shortness of breath, cough, fatigue, and are frequently scared of the unknown. Patients also have other comorbidities, meaning that they have other diseases like heart disease, emphysema, cancer, and these diseases cause the patient to have greater symptom burden. As the disease progresses, patients experience worsening symptom burden. And acute exacerbations are those time points when the disease progresses and the patient has a worsening of the pulmonary fibrosis. So this is important, and this is the background for kind of like an overview of your of the pulmonary fibrosis. And I'm not sure if you've seen this picture before. You may have, but it's always good to review. So here's what we know about pulmonary fibrosis. We know that we cannot predict how it will progress, and that when you talk to other patients who have pulmonary fibrosis, everyone has a different disease course. So if you take a look, I don't have a pointer, but if you go across the timeline, that is in years. So 1 year out through 6 years. And if you look on what's the y-axis, which says disease progression, this is reported by lay. And the onset of disease is thought to occur before patients ever experience symptoms. And then there is a delay often until it's adequately or accurately diagnosed, as was in the video this morning. And so there are 4 different patients, A, B, C, and D, on this timeline. So patient A, his disease from onset to time of death was 1 year. And those are always, they're very rattling for us who take care of patients, because sometimes we don't really feel like we get to know the patient very well, and then we receive this horrible news. Then patient B, you'll see, has a small amount of decline up where the star is, and then it goes, hey, they have what is called this acute exacerbation, and it's a drop-off. And the important thing here is, unfortunately, it never goes back to normal or how it was before. And then they decline a little more, and this patient, unfortunately, died at 3 years. Then patient C, you see, from time of onset of disease through time of death is 6 years. And then patient D, the patient has not died. And so we don't know how far this is, what that timeline will be. But this is the important thing here is, this is sensitive, a sensitive topic to talk to you about, but I really feel that it's best to be adequately prepared and understand what the potential future patients have, and that these are conversations that sometimes providers or physicians or clinicians won't have because they don't want to take away hope. But it's really important that you know what the potential chances are out there. We know that patients experience a myriad of symptoms. So if you take a look at all these cogs in this wheel, patients experience shortness of breath, cough, fatigue. As a result, they become deconditioned. We call that the spiral of disability. And what happens is patients do less because they have difficulty breathing, they become very fatigued, and so consequently they do less and less. And that is an important point that we want to change, because that's where pulmonary rehab is really very helpful to help the patient appreciate what it is that they can do safely. And it's also good for the psyche because you're with other people who are going through the same thing. Unfortunately, because there's a lot of fear of the unknown, because we can't predict how your disease will progress, many patients have anxiety and depression. And we know that all of these symptoms contribute to quality of life. And our goal is we really want to help you achieve the best quality of life. So palliative care. So palliative care is this word that I've done focus groups with our patients and reported about this, and our patients said, I don't know what the word is, but I don't like it. And so if you have that feeling, that's completely normal, and my goal today is to change your thoughts about that. So the CAPC is the Center to Advance Palliative Care, and this is an organization that is housed in Mount Sinai Hospital in New York under the guidance of Dr. Diane Marr. And last year they updated the definition. So palliative care is the act of bringing people together to ensure that all those with serious illness, and I want to point out serious illness such as pulmonary fibrosis, receive the care they need in the right place at the right time. If you take a look at this schema that here, it's very similar. So this is the difference between palliative care and hospice. The important takeaway is they're not the same thing. When your doctor suggests palliative care, they're not giving up on you. They're not sending you out to pasture. Palliative care is how do we best help you achieve your best quality of life. So if you take a look, this starts at time of diagnosis, and this is throughout the whole disease course. Palliative care is in the bottom half. Palliative care includes getting you the right oxygen, making sure you go to pulmonary rehab, addressing your symptoms, and reducing your symptom burden. If you have cough, are there medicines that we can help to reduce your cough? If you have shortness of breath, are there medicines? Yes, there are, that can help with that. If you're anxious and depressed and just scared out of your mind, there are resources that we can help. These are all considered parts of palliative care. Our goal is to help to reduce symptom burden. So the takeaway here is that palliative care are these efforts to improve quality of life. And they can be offered right alongside disease-directed therapies such as lung transplant evaluation, participating in research studies, taking antifibrotics, or taking the medication that your doctor may prescribe for your disease. So this is really important to see that these two go hand in hand. And the reason the course is wavy is because everybody's disease course is different. So hospice, what is hospice? Hospice is provided when the patient is thought to have less than 6 months to live if the illness runs the normal course. It focuses on comfort and pain relief, and the patient forgoes aggressive treatment, including antifibrotics. And that sometimes is a game changer because patients become really connected to their antifibrotics. So it really requires a lot of discussion. What happens is because the medications are so expensive, hospices don't have the resources to pay for those medications. Now, the important takeaway is that hospice should be reevaluated for eligibility at regular intervals. So mostly it's 6 months, that's the Medicare guidelines, but some people will do it at 3 months. I've seen that recently. But I like to tell this story of one of our patients at the Simmons Center. He lived by himself. He was retired military. He was on 15 liters of oxygen, and our doctor, he didn't qualify for lung transplant. And our doctor said, there's really not much more that I can do for you other than to continue to see you. And so they mutually agreed that hospice was an option. So hospice became involved, and this man lived for an additional 3 years because his quality of life was taken care of. He had medications to help with his shortness of breath. He had somebody to talk to about what he was afraid of, and our doctor was more than happy to re-sign those forms for eligibility every 6 months. And what we find often with hospice, and think about in your own personal world, you probably know someone who's been through hospice. What we find is that people don't always gain the best benefit out of hospice, and the findings show that most people don't get to hospice until a week before their death. So there's a lot of suffering that's happening prior to that that is really not necessary. Our goal is we want to help you live and have the best quality of life. Now, it gets a little confusing, but it's not meant to be. So there's primary palliative care and there's specialty palliative care. So primary palliative care is delivered by the clinical care team. So that's your primary care doctor, wherever you live, or your local pulmonologist, whoever takes care of you. So again, palliative care can include optimizing your oxygen, making sure you're going to pulmonary rehab, addressing your symptoms. Specialty or secondary palliative care, that is a specialty interdisciplinary team that's housed within most hospitals. And we think that optimal palliative care for patients with chronic lung disease, such as ILD or IPF or pulmonary fibrosis, it should incorporate both. The realities are that sometimes that is difficult to happen because we know when you come to see your doctor that it's an effort. You usually have to come in a wheelchair, you have lots of oxygen. So when we add on the suggestion for specialty palliative care, it's not always easy to get to that appointment. So we do realize that. And then of note, there is a national shortage of specialty palliative care providers. And in one study, I want to bring up supportive care is another term for this, and it's more favorably viewed by patients than the term palliative care, as I mentioned earlier. But the bottom line is I hope that when you walk out of this room, you're not afraid of the term palliative care. That's our goal. So palliative care has different names. So it can be supportive care, quality of life care, palliative care. Our goal is to help you achieve your best quality of life. Now, planning for the future. We're going to go through this sentence by sentence. Advanced care planning is a process of asking you what is most important in the event of future serious illness or loss of ability to make your own decisions. Now, we're addressing this for patients with pulmonary fibrosis, but this is important for everyone to address because we all know people who have heart attacks and die, and they weren't planning that. They might have a stroke. They weren't planning that. They might, unfortunately, be in an automobile accident or have some tragedy, and they die quickly. So advanced care planning is important for everyone. And these conversations allow you to think about what would you want when you get sick. You state your values, your goals, and your preferences for future medical care, and you prepare for medical decision making. And advanced care planning it's focused on completing paper forms, including documentation of a healthcare proxy and wishes in an advance directive. And we're going to break all those down because I know there's several forms out there and they can be confusing, and that's not the intent. Now, this website is from the National Institute of Health, and it's the Senior Health section. And you can go on this website and read this, and I'll read it to you. So few of us are comfortable talking about death, whether our own or a loved one's. It's a scary, even taboo subject for many. The end of a life, no matter how long and well lived, can bring a sense of loss and sadness. Thinking about the end of life is a reminder of our own mortality, so we may avoid even thinking about death. This is normal, completely normal, but death is normal too, and all of us will face it at some point. So considerations. These are important considerations that you should think about. What do I want for myself? If I'm unable to make decisions for myself, do I have someone to make decisions for me? A decision maker. Do they know they are my decision maker? Do they know what I value and want? Do I want to be admitted to the intensive care unit and put on a breathing machine with a tube down my throat to breathe for me? Do I want to be at home or in a hospice setting surrounded by my family and friends? The important message there is there's no right or wrong answer for the ICU and the hospice. That's a very personal decision. But our goal is we want you to think about it, select your decision maker, and let them know so that they can honor your wishes. And then do you have any special requests? Do I want to be an organ donor? Do I want to have an autopsy for research? April 16th every year is National Healthcare Decision Day, and this is an initiative of the Conversation Project to inspire, educate, and empower the public and providers about the importance of advanced care planning. It's simple, it's free, and they have tools to help guide, and this is available in all 50 states, and the website is www.nhdd.org, so National Healthcare Decision Day. And I'm happy to talk with people afterwards and share these slides. So, selecting someone to act on your behalf. How many in this room have made that decision? And does okay, I think I'm preaching to the choir here. And does your decision maker know what your wishes are? So not as many hands there. Okay, that's better, but still not as many. All right, the person you choose to make healthcare decisions for you is known by different names in different states. They could be a healthcare agent, a proxy, a representative, an attorney, in fact, a surrogate, or even a patient advocate. This is someone who you trust with your life and you would feel would be able to act on your wishes and separate his or her own feelings from yours. Let me break that down. You make the decision that, you know, when my time comes, I don't want to be on a ventilator and I want to die peacefully. But whoever your decision maker all of a sudden gets involved and says, oh, I can't honor that. I want everything done. And I can tell you, this happens all the time in the hospital. And so this is something that you as an individual have to speak with your decision maker, and you have to have these honest, frank conversations. It's also beneficial if they live close by or could travel to be at your side if needed. And we'll talk with you now about these sensitive issues and listen to your wishes. And then we'll be available likely long into the future and would be able to handle conflicting opinions between family members, friends, and medical personnel. So I'd like to tell the story quickly. We had an individual years ago who he had IPF, and he was in the intensive care unit, and he and his wife knew she was his decision maker. She honored his wishes. He had 7 children, and 6 of the children were on board with the wife, 1 wasn't. And he came out as we were leaving the intensive care unit after the decision was made that let's make this patient comfort measures only and treat them, honor what they want. And this son really just was challenged by all of this, and he was like, can't you just go in there and do something? Can't you put an IV in? Can't you do something to, to help my father? And so these are these honest conversations that, this is like the real world. And then you want someone, too, that's going to be a strong advocate in the face of an unresponsive doctor or an institution. And that happens. We would like to think that every single doctor in the world is as good as our PF doctors are, because I'm, of course, personally biased towards them. But you will run into doctors that, unfortunately, they just aren't. So you need your decision maker to honor your wishes and advocate for you in a strong manner. Now, this is interesting. So who makes healthcare decisions when you cannot? Now, this is set by, these are state rules. So if you take a look, so the spouse is the first person. This is this first ranking class of healthcare representatives. Now, if there's not a spouse, then it's the adult children, not of your spouse. So, you know, people get remarried. And so say that you're remarried and your new wife has adult children. They're not involved. They're not first ranking class, so they don't have a say. Unless, of course, you have some formal agreement that you wanted them to do this. These are just the way it comes out. And a social worker at work shared this with me, and she said they're very strict about this order. So first it's the spouse. Then if there's no spouse, it's all other adult children. Then it's the parents. Then it's the adult brothers and sisters. Then adult grandchildren. And then it goes in this ranking order, other adults who know your preferences and values. So these important papers. So these are a few examples of more common advanced directives. So one of them we start with is the handicap parking placard. This is not technically an advanced directive, but it's really important, and we'll talk about that. The 5 wishes document, a state advance directive, and the PULST, and we'll go through all of these. So this is an example of a disability parking placard. So can I have a show of hands, if you're comfortable, how many people already have the disability parking placard? Okay. This is my personal bias that I say to patients. We know that this disease causes you to be short of breath. We know that this disease causes you to be more short of breath when you move. So we suggest save your energy for the good stuff. So you don't want to go to the grocery store and park down the road, or you don't want to go to the movies and park, far away. This is your time. You've earned this by nature of your disease. You deserve to have a disability parking placard. And you can talk, each state has a different mechanism, but it goes through the DMV, the Department of Motor Vehicles, and you bring those forms in to your doctor, and the doctor signs them. And I can tell you, like on ours in Pennsylvania, there's 3 categories. 1, patient cannot walk more than 200 feet, patient's on supplemental oxygen, patient has lung disease. And they have to be notarized, and then you take it back to your DMV, and then you get one of these parking placards. I highly endorse if you don't have one. This is what we call, as I said, saving your energy for the good stuff. Now, this is another important document. This is called the 5 wishes. And this is available online. If you Google 5 wishes, you can get to this document. It's written in user-friendly lay language, and this was the first advanced directive to address personal, emotional, and spiritual issues, in addition to meeting medical and legal criteria. This is a state advanced healthcare directive. So each state has their own. This is the example of the Pennsylvania Advanced Health Directive, but this walks you through. Unfortunately, I can't, the print's too small for me, but okay. This form has 3 parts. It lets you choose a medical decision maker, make your own healthcare choices. Oops, so sorry. I'm just too busy trying to read. So part 1, choose a medical decision maker. 2, make your own healthcare choices. 3, sign the form. And what you do is, depending on what state you live on, again, Google. If you don't have computer access, when you go to your doctors, talk to them. They have access to these forms. What you want to do is you want to complete these forms and then give it to whoever your primary care doctor is. You can give it to all the doctors that take care of you, and you also should keep a copy of one to take with you in the advance that it's lost in the medical record or they can't find it. And the key is this honors your wishes. And I'd like to give a quick story here. So my parents are both deceased, but in 2000, my dad was in Florida, and he had complications from cancer. And he was scheduled to go home the next day from the hospital, but he had a heart attack, and he died. Now, surprisingly, my parents back in the 70s had living wills when living wills first came out. And he had this heart attack in front of my mother, and my mother ran and got the nurse. They, of course, rushed her out, and they did CPR, but they put him on a stretcher, and they're taking him down the hall. And she sees him, and she said, "Whoa, wait, he didn't want that." And so one of the nurses went to the chart, found the advanced directive, and they stopped. And I was like, my mother was not one who was like a healthcare provider or anything, but I'm like, Mom, like, that's pretty good. Like, I'm really proud of you. So she honored his wishes. And that's one of the nicest gifts that you can give someone. Now, this is a little more confusing. So it's the POLST form. This is the physician's order for life-sustaining treatment, and it depends on the state that you live in, but it might say MOLST, M-O-L-S-T, for medical orders. And these forms are completed by your healthcare provider after he or she discusses what is important to you, your diagnosis, what's likely to happen in the future, and what your treatment options are. So a doctor, or sometimes a physician assistant or nurse practitioner, it depends on your state, must sign the form for it to be valid. And the goal is to effectively communicate the wishes of serious ill patients to either limit medical treatment as they move from one care setting to another. So another example, my mother just died last year. She had dementia. She had a POLST form that was signed by her doctor in the event that she had to leave the nursing home to go to the hospital, so they would know what she wanted. She didn't want to be intubated. She didn't want, on that form it's about intubation. Do you want to have CPR? Do you want to have antibiotics? Do you want to have fluids? So it breaks it down into all of those forms. This gives medical orders to the emergency personnel too, based on your current medical situation. And POLST forms and advanced directives are both advanced care plans, but they're not the same. So that sounds confusing, and we're going to go into a little more detail into this. One of the important things is if you're at home, and we know patients get sick at home and family members panic, and you may have this whole discussion that I don't want to do anything, but somebody is scared or trying to be good-natured, and they call EMS. EMS by law is mandated to resuscitate you, unless if you had the POLST form, you have to have it on your refrigerator and be able to show it to them. And like in Pennsylvania, I'll show you a copy of ours. It's hot pink, and it has to be on your refrigerator, so it gets people's attention. So this is that little brilliant color here, but this is the form for Pennsylvania, and this has to be on the refrigerator so EMS would know what to do. And that's the continuation of the form. So now, this document, and I'm sorry, the colors aren't the prettiest, but this is, if you Google POLST, it's www.polst.org. So here's the comparison of the POLST form and the advanced directive. So the POLST form is a medical order. It's signed, it has to be signed by the clinician. The advance directive, in comparison, is a legal document. So who completes the PULSE? That's that person, the healthcare professional who takes care of you. The advance directive is completed by yourself. So who should have a PULSE? Any seriously ill or frail individual, regardless of age, whose healthcare professional wouldn't be surprised if he or she died in the next year. Advance directives, who should have this? As I mentioned earlier, all competent adults. The PULSE form document communicates specific medical orders, CPR, intubation with a tube, a breathing tube, IV fluids, antibiotics. The advance directive, it says, what do you want? And you might think, well, I don't want any of those. But for it to be like the medical order, you have to have the PULSE signed by the physician. Now, the PULSE, can this document appoint a surrogate decision maker? No. The advance directive, yes. So it's really best to have both in concert, and I'll show you in this next slide. I actually want to go to this one. So here's how they work together. So all adults should complete an advance directive and update it periodically. One of the important things is that these are not set in stone. You might decide when you're feeling well, I don't want to have any of those things done. I just want to die naturally at home. Well, sometimes your thoughts change as you become sicker and your disease advances, and you think, I want to get to that granddaughter's wedding, or I want to get to graduation. So these are not set in stone. You can change these. So that's why we suggest you update them periodically. Now, it goes down, and then anyone who's diagnosed with an advanced illness or frailty at any age should complete a PULSE form and update this as the health status changes. And then our goal is that the treatment wishes are honored. So the two work in tandem. And the important reason to have both is that advance directive gives the privy to your decision maker. The PULSE form is what the doctor has for orders and how to proceed. So now here's the resource section. So how do you find a palliative care program? These are two options. And the first one is caringinfo.org. If you go to this website and you put in your zip code, it will tell you what is closest around you. If you want to get involved with a hospital-based palliative care program, if you go to getpalliativecare.org, find a palliative care team. That can tell you what's in your area. I'll leave it there for a minute if you want to take a picture or write it down. The other group that I highly endorse for home care and palliative care and hospice are your local visiting nurses. So visiting nurses have been around for a long time. Their goal is to help you be safe in your home, and we suggest to have visiting nurses go into the home, you establish a relationship with them, and they can actually help to guide your care at home in concert with your physician. So some complementary resources. The Pulmonary Fibrosis Foundation has some really good resources on their website, and last year they did a series of 12 videos. And what is interstitial lung disease, what's pulmonary rehab, some patient stories, what is palliative care. This is one where I do a 4-minute video on what is palliative care. So you can Google that, and you can find that on the PFF website. Then for providers, the Pulmonary Fibrosis Foundation came to our institution, and this provides CME for continuing medical education for doctors, nurses, anyone who is in need of these medical education points. But it's reframing palliative care to patients with IPF. And in this video, it's 30 minutes. it shows examples of discussions when a patient is first diagnosed with IPF and then throughout the disease course. So it's a really nice segue of how to talk with your provider and how your provider could talk with you. I'm not sure if you're aware of this, you may be, but this is another excellent website. It's called Prepare. So this is created by Dr. Rebecca Sidori at UCSF in San Francisco. And this is a video, and the website is www.prepareforyourcare.org. So when you go to this website, they have all these different options, and they give these examples of patients and their, these different scenarios. So that's another way to also prepare for your care. Now, this is the Conversation Project. This is what I had mentioned earlier. So this is dedicated to helping people talk about their wishes for end-of-life care. And we know, they state, we know that no guide or single conversation can cover all the decisions that you and your family may face. But what it does is, if you gain this shared understanding, and you help your decision makers, it's one of the nicest gifts that you can give your decision makers. They know what you want, they can honor their wishes, and so it makes it easier to make these decisions when the time comes. Now, this is a really nice example. I received this from the support group in Seattle, and I think, Dave, I see you back there. So you provide this vial of life, and it's similar to that pulsed form, but it's in the, I guess, in the refrigerator. Put it in the refrigerator, and it tells what your wishes are, so that EMS in the state of Washington would know to look for that and follow what you want. Okay, so just to repeat what he said, the sticker that's down here underneath the valve goes on the refrigerator to direct EMS to go inside the refrigerator and to look at the paperwork. Now, this is a really good website. I thought this, when I was looking through this, this is the National Institute of Aging. So these are your tax dollars at work. And they have what they call the age page, getting your affairs in order. So their recommendations are, you put your important papers and copies of legal documents in one place. You tell a trusted family member or friend where you put all of these papers. The key is, like, can I remember where I put this stuff? Discuss your end-of-life preferences with your doctor, and then give permission in advance for your doctor or lawyer to talk to your caregiver as needed. And probably the easiest way to find this is just to Google getting your affairs in order age page. Now, this is a question that frequently comes up, and patients will approach us. They want to donate their body to science at their end of life. And I'd like to tell you one story from our support group. So back in 2003, we had a gentleman attend our support group. He was a city firefighter, and he couldn't get his care at our center because his insurance wasn't accepted. Ridiculous stuff. But he came very faithfully to support group, and the one day he came up to me and he said, I need to talk to you, and it's really important. And I said, okay, can we talk after support group? And he said, yes, but I need to talk to you. And I said, okay. So after support group, he came up to me and he said, can we talk? And I said, yes. He said, my disease is advancing. He said, I want to give my lungs to your doctors so that they can study them. And I was a little shocked. And he was the one comforting me. He had his hand on my arm, and he said, it's okay, really, it's okay. I've come to grips with this, but I really want to do this. So I came back. At the time, Naftali Kaminsky was our director, and I said to him, I'm like, okay, this is a new one for me. And I told him, and this is when you know you work with really good people. I didn't get oh no, we can't do that. No one's ever done anything. He turns around, he picks up the phone, he calls one of his contacts in our tissue bank and talks to him, and he said, yes, it's called warm autopsy. He said they do it in prostate cancer. This was back in, again, 2003. He said they do it in prostate cancer. He said they also do it in neuromuscular diseases, a lot of neurological diseases. What has to happen is at the time of death, within 6 hours, the organs have to be harvested. So this man wanted to donate his lungs. So we had to develop this protocol, and he lived for another year and a half. And we were at a meeting in Seattle, of all places. Pittsburgh to Seattle's like a significant distance. And he died while we were there. And his wife called and said, he's died, like, how do we do this? And Naphtali and I were like, we can't do it. Like, we're like across the United States. And this is what we're saying. And we're saying to her, we're not so sure how to, to do this. And she said, you don't have a choice. She said, he would kill me if I didn't do this. So that was our first warm autopsy was managed across the, United States. And I remember going to support group the next month, and a patient asked, well, where's so-and-so? And so because of HIPAA laws, we're not able to, always share this information. But we were able to bring it about in a way where new research protocols that we were doing, and we told the story, and one of the ladies said, why would you want my old scarred up lungs? Like, who would want them? And Naphtali said, well, it helps us to understand if we can see real tissue close to life, it can help us gain a better understanding of what's happening. So that was back in 2004 that our first one occurred, and at the time patients only donated lungs, and we just had our 100th donation earlier this year. It's grown. Patients can donate their lung, their heart, their lungs, their heart. They can, while they're in there, what happens is, I'm going to move away from this just for a second, but so you can see it. What happens is, within 6 hours of death, the patient is brought to our hospital morgue. They haven't all been in the hospital. We've had people brought by their funeral directors. So what happens is they do a U-shaped incision, and they lift the chest wall, and they take out whatever the patient dictates that they want ahead of time. So they can take their lungs, they can take just their heart, but while they're in there, what happens is it gives them exposure to their vertebral bodies. And so what happens is they can do shavings of the vertebral bodies, and they can grow stem cells. And these are the right kind of stem cells. And so it can help them understand. It's advanced now, everybody's kind of getting in on it. Like, could we, if they want, would they give a kidney? Would they give a spleen? Would they give a piece of skin? And so patients have contributed greatly to better understanding of how the disease progresses. So the reason I talk about this, donating your body to science, frequently this is something that patients will ask us. Now, there's something that, and this all depends on what your thinking is, but we kind of have a personal bias. So there's what's called the Humanity Gifts Registry. So each state and each hospital institution has what's called a Humanity Gifts Registry. So what happens here is you have to do the background work and contact them, and then this is that altruistic way of donating your body to science. So what we know is that you can, at the time of your death, you can donate your entire body. And what happens is that when medical students or dental students are in their training, they have to do a lot of work on cadavers or these bodies. And what is happening in the United States is there's less donation of body or of a person's body at the time of death to these humanity gift registries. And what happens is, I'm going to go back. I don't know that I can go back, but don't really look at this slide yet, because what I learned by preparing this, thank you, is that there are also people out there that will ask you to donate your body to science, and then they sell your parts. And yes, this happens in the United States. And so these, when you look at a Humanity Gifts Registry, it's typically .edu or .org, and the for-profit companies are .com. And I saw that as I was doing preparation, and I thought, .com, that's a business. So I went and I dug a little deeper, and what I found is that these people these companies can make a lot of money off of your body parts. And again, this is purely your decision if you want to go down this road, who you donate it to. But we just want you to be aware. What happens then is when you have, on our end for training, where doctors have to learn, or paramedics have to learn how to intubate, it's best for them to learn on a real, or not a live, but a real airway, and they have to pay for them, and they have to pay a lot of money. Or you have an orthopedic surgeon who wants to learn how to better do, his technique on a hand. These companies sell them back. So it was actually very disturbing to me, because the patients that I know who want to donate their body to science are doing it because they're trying to do it for the right reason, and they want to help future doctors and dentists learn how to best take care. So this is, that's just my little soapbox there. But so now back to this slide. So here's an example, the anatomical board of the state of Florida. What I tried doing is I tried to cover a couple different places in the United States. And this is one of these ways that when you see these anatomical boards of a state, that the body goes to these medical schools, and they distribute it so that people who are in training can learn how to do this. So this is one of the, what I consider a preferential way to do this. So a review of considerations. What do I want for myself? If I'm unable to make decisions, do I have someone to make decisions for me? Do they know they are my decision maker? Do they know what I value and want? Do I want to be admitted to the ICU and put on a breathing machine with a tube down my throat to breathe for me? Do I want to be at home or in a hospice setting surrounded by my family and friends? The important caveat with both of those is it's whatever you want. It's your decision, and you can change that decision. So it's not set in stone. Are any special requests? Do I want to be an organ donor? Do I want to have an autopsy for research? So things to consider ahead of time. So with that, Seth just walked out of the room. I'm supposed to, I'm at 0. I made my time.
Perfect timing.
So I'm going to turn it over to Seth. He's the Vice President of Development for the Pulmonary Fibrosis Foundation.
Thanks, Dr. Lindell. Another round of applause. It was such an informative presentation, so thank you. I learn something new every time you speak, so great job. I am the VP of Development, which is just kind of a fancy way of saying fundraising. And another question that comes up to me pretty frequently is estate planning, both from patients and from their families after their loved one has passed. So you heard the introduction of Lori Chandler earlier. Lori, aside from what you heard about Lori, she's also a board member, the treasurer, and a lung transplant recipient. So I think we're going to pop her up here on the screen. Lori was not able to be here with us today. Unfortunately, she just was coming home from vacation and had a slip and fractured a vertebrae. But Lori, being Lori, said, I am still coming and I'm still presenting and I still want to be a part of this. And are we able to get her up on the screen here? No. Lori, are you on?
I am.
Okay.
Oops.
And Lori, just so you know, we have handouts on the tables. Lori's going to be speaking to those handouts, but we have a lot more in the back of the room if you'd like to take one with you. So, Lori Chandler.
Seth, please just confirm my voice control. If it's too loud, I can turn it down.
Is that okay? Is the sound okay, everybody? Okay, we're good.
All right. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for allowing me to participate via Skype from here in New Hampshire. I missed the summit. It's one of the most exciting opportunities. I miss that experience of being with all the energy in the room. But suffice it to say, we'll do what we can for today. So I thought it would be helpful to begin by telling a story of why I became involved with the foundation. Like so many of you in the room and throughout the conference, I took the long road in identifying what my condition was. It took over 7 years, more than 5 pulmonary, and 4 different hospitals.
Lori, hey, Lori,
yeah.
Lori, can you hear me?
Yeah.
You are cutting in and out, so I'm not sure if you're on a headset, it may be easier
No.
to.
I'm not, but let me try this real quick. Seth, is that any better?
I think it is better. Let's try it.
Oh, good. Thank you. All right. So anyway, finally, I fell in the good hands of National Jewish Health Center in Denver, Colorado. And within a very short time, in a week, I was diagnosed. The doctor indicated that he had good news, and that was found condition. Seth, is this working okay?
You're going in and out again.
Seth, I think you should pick up on my slides or consider this at a different point and review the highlights of my handouts.
Okay. So we can actually talk, for those of you that are going to be with us tomorrow and we have a fundraising session, we can talk, we'll get into this a little bit more tomorrow in that presentation. Unfortunately, the tech does not seem to be working here, but we still do have time for questions and answers for Kathy. We have a microphone up front. If you're not able to get up to the microphone, we have Amy walking around with a microphone in the back. Just raise your hand if you have a question, and Kathy's here to answer those questions for you. Thank you.
Yeah, you don't want
That's a question and a bit of a comment. The summit has been wonderfully educational for those of us who are patients, I think. And this morning, Dr. Perez made a point that I took to heart when she said, guys, all of this research work is for the patients. My question is, how can we as patients, who are probably the most highly motivated part of this whole group, become more engaged in the effort to develop new cures, new research programs? I realize you all are interested in us making donations. We can sure do that. And that's a significant part of our passing, is we'll have a legacy to leave behind. But in the meantime, if we could become more engaged, I think we're pretty well motivated to be a support group for all of you guys that are the superstars.
Well, you're very kind. You're the superstars out here. So I have to tell you, there are several ways that you can help. And we have seen this happen at our own institution. So we have very grateful donors. And I always say, it's not just about money. money's important and you need to move forward, but there are a lot of things that you can do to help advance this cause. One is participate in research, and when you participate in research, you help to find out if something works or doesn't work. And there's several ways to participate in research. You can participate where you're in a study where you give your patient information. It doesn't cost anything to you except time. So we call those patient-reported outcomes. You can donate your blood. You can donate, if you had an open lung biopsy, you can donate that tissue. As I mentioned, at the time of your death, if you wanted to participate in a program where you donated your lungs or you donated your body to science. I feel very strongly that, again, it doesn't have to be money, but there's all these different ways that you, by your participation, and I'll give an example at our place, at the Simmons Center. So our donor gave $5 million in 2001, and he wanted to start a center where they found the cause, found the cure, provided patient education and support. I came in 2001, and I got the third charge, and my two things that I was told I needed to do was I needed to develop a support group to provide a home for patients and caregivers, but then also to provide to see every patient in clinic and to write a letter to them at the end of the visit in lay terms. While the doctor dictates a note and sends it to the referring doctor, my job was to write to the patient and say, you have this is what they're going to do, and this is the management plan. I did that for probably about 5 years, and then we got too big, and I couldn't continue to do it. But what happened is we developed all these relationships with our patients as a result of the support group, and we have what we call these patient-driven programs. Patients are our biggest source of support back to us. So the woman back there behind you, Charlotte, Charlotte's one of our patients here. So you heard me mention earlier that because of HIPAA, we can't share information about patients. Charlotte pretty quickly said, can we do this on our own? And we were like, you can do whatever you want outside. We just can't provide patient information. So they developed what's called the Caring Network. So our Caring Network still stands 17 years later. And that Caring Network is patients contact each other when somebody's sick, somebody needs a little help, somebody's getting a transplant, somebody is in the hospital. They often let us know who's in the hospital before we even know our patient's in the hospital. So that's a patient-driven initiative where it provides support to the patients and the caregivers. And you can do that, anyone can do that at your institution. And you reach out to each other and help. Our second patient-driven initiative was this one where this patient started this program to donate his lungs. We have since changed it because people said that warm autopsy was a little gruesome. So it's now called the Rapid Tissue Donation Program. You saw the picture of the golf outing. So that patient started this golf outing, and what's happened is, I like to tell the story is, I didn't show a picture, but every year we take our patients on the Gateway Clipper. If you've been to Pittsburgh, there's three rivers. And back when we started in 2001, 2002, I said to our medical director at the time, I said, wouldn't it be nice if we could do an activity where we took our patients somewhere and we were all there, we had oxygen, and it's safe? And he said, well, what are you thinking? And I said, what about the big Gateway Clipper? And he said, that's a great idea. See how much it cost. And so it came back, it was $3,000. I went to our administrator, who her first thing was, no, we don't have money for you to take patients on the boat cruise. So anyway, I came back and I told him, and he was like pushing me. He said, go talk to the division chief. And the division chief said, okay, let's do it once, we'll find the money. And last month, we just had our 17th annual Gateway Clipper. So what happened that's interesting is that that was in October, 17 years ago. That following February, at that support group, that patient came up to me and said, I own this golf course. And so that starts the golf course, or the golf outing. And I've never had to go back and ask for money again, because what's happened is that the golf outing raises the funds for us to take our patient on the Gateway Clipper. In December, we have a holiday luncheon that's a hot sit-down luncheon with no speakers. We get 90 people in the room. And it's just a time of fellowship, and everyone is so excited because they get to see each other. But these things cost money, and so that, because of this generous gift from this patient, this idea, this pays for this. We had another patient. We have that his wife had IPF. He was a lobbyist in Pennsylvania. And the reason I'm giving you these stories is because every one of you can do this, and you can do some variation of it, and that's giving back. And that helps to advance the awareness and advocacy for this disease, because still today, you go into your communities, people don't know what pulmonary fibrosis is. But so this guy's a lobbyist, and his grade school friend just happened to be Arlen Specter. And Arlen Specter said to him, he was a senator in Pennsylvania, he said, what's wrong with your wife? And he said, she has idiopathic pulmonary fibrosis. He said, I never heard of that. He said, and they were good friends, and he said, I know you didn't. He said, you're going to give me money. So that was back in 2007, and that started at the time the PA-IPF Registry. So what that was a group of the University of Pittsburgh, Penn, Temple, Geisinger Health System, and Penn State Hershey. So 5 academic health systems in Pennsylvania, we joined together. And what we did was we did patient education events in Pennsylvania. So the first time we did it in Harrisburg, because this is where this gentleman lived, and he wanted us to do it there. So it was open to anyone with IPF, because back at that time, IPF was more of the focus. Now it's pulmonary fibrosis because we know more. But we had people come who, the one woman who spoke up, Heather, with that last question in the last session, she was at that first patient education event, and when she went to our medical director, she was being seen in a community where no one knew what pulmonary fibrosis was. She came to this event, she learned about pulmonary fibrosis. He said, come to Pittsburgh, I'm happy to see you. Her father had died from IPF years before. What happened is, I like to think she came to that event, she met people, she got to transplant, and she had an exacerbation in her disease, and she ended up in the hospital in Hershey, which is central Pennsylvania, in February. And it was, of course, that year we have a blizzard, and she's in the hospital during the blizzard. And she's not doing well, but they said if you can get her to Pittsburgh. So Becky Bascom, who's a physician, was her local pulmonologist. She went in the helicopter with her, and they flew to Pittsburgh. And she waited in Pittsburgh for a few days, and luckily she had a lung transplant. Now here she is, 10 years out. And you'll hear many of these stories. So this PA-IPF initiative were these 5 centers where we went out, we were trying to introduce the idea, awareness of IPF to patients and to get them. Because I can tell you, even to this day, we see patients too late in the course of their disease at our center. What happened with that is then it advanced. We realized, okay, the patients are getting it, but the community providers are not. They're not referring until late. So then we added on CME. So we did CME events for the providers. And We did it during the day, and we learned that they have to work during the day, so that's not a good time to do it. So the next year, we did it in the evening, and we had 90 people attend. Because physicians and advanced practice providers, they need to obtain CME to maintain their certifications and licenses. So they came and they got this, and we're, kind of sending the message out. The other important group is pulmonary rehab. Pulmonary rehab centers are critical in spreading the word about resources that are available for pulmonary fibrosis. So these patients, or these providers, were able to come and learn more about the disease and get out into the community. And we are always very, the Pulmonary Fibrosis Foundation has incredible resources, and we always make sure that we tell these people about these resources because, they get busy in the course of their day and they don't know what's available. So I have this term that I use. I think that patients, their caregivers, and especially pulmonary rehab folks are foot soldiers. And part of your job is you go back into your community when you learn more about this, because as you mentioned earlier, you're here. There's a lot of other people that aren't able to get here. So part of your job is being able to go back and share what you learn here.
We as patients don't like to feel like victims. We like to be advocates. We like to be the fans that are in the stadium, that are cheering on the team that's on the field, that's finding the solution. But in order for us to do that, we've got to feel like we're something other than just the recipients of the information at the meeting.
Right.
So, yeah, no, that's for you. For those that couldn't hear, he said, as patients, we also want to be the advocates, and we have an advocacy program at the PFF as well. There's a presentation about advocacy during the summit, and there are ways you can sign up. We have Hill Day in DC where we bring patients and caregivers to DC to advocate as well. So it is on our website, but there is an advocacy session as well. I unfortunately think we need to feed everybody. It's lunchtime, and I know I'm hungry. Again, thank you so much. This was a great session. Really appreciate it, and we'll see you this afternoon.